So I get a lot of questions about triads, and people comment all the time, just learn your triads up and down the guitar neck. And as usual, I tend to think of triads a little differently than most people. So I want to show you all your triads up and down the guitar neck, but I want to show you the easiest way possible for you to learn all of your triads. And then I want to show you, something useful that you can do with them, because there's really no point in learning them if you can't do something with them. So to start with, a triad is just the three notes that make up a chord. So if you're talking about a major triad, this would be your 1, your 3, and your 5. So for example, if we were going to talk about the C major triad, we would say it was a C, E, and a G. And it doesn't really matter what order you put these in, and you've heard people talk about inversions. And this would be where instead of playing at C, E, and G, you might play E, C, G or G, E, C. It doesn't matter what combination you use. As long as you use these three notes, you're always going to be making a C major chord. So a triad is just the three notes that make up a chord. And if you look up triads on the internet, what you're going to get is all of these diagrams showing you three note sections and all the little patterns up and down the guitar neck. And it gets really overwhelming, and I want to make this as simple as I possibly can. So for me, it's better not to think of this in all of these different diagrams, but to put it on one diagram so we can see the whole thing at one time. So what I've done here is this is your A major triad shapes up and down the guitar neck. So if you look at this diagram, you might notice that these shapes look familiar to you because these are your chord shapes up and down the guitar neck. So for example, these are the A major triads. So obviously if we come down here and we play our A chord that we're used to playing, these are all your major triads in this A chord shape. So as long as you're playing this A chord shape, these are your triad shapes around that chord shape. Now, as we go up, and we talked about this in a video a week or two ago, that your G chord is right above that A chord shape. And this is also the same position where you can shift up and play your bar chord. So we're still making an A chord, but now we're playing it in a bar chord shape. And again, these are your triads. These are your three note sections that where you can find your A major chord around this shape. As we move up the guitar neck, the next shape we get is this D chord. And that's why I talk about your A shape, your bar chord shape, and your D chord shape all the time. Now, your D chord shape, you might be saying, well, there's a bunch of other notes here. That's because the actual D chord shape is played like this. It's played with a D with a C chord shape on top of it. So in order to play it, you've got to kind of stretch your fingers like this. But as long as you understand and can see that you've got a D chord shape, and then where your ring finger is, it makes a C chord on top of that, then you don't have to worry about, say, learning all the triads. You can just see the pattern, see the shape there, because it's a D chord with a C chord put on top of it. And then from there, we come back and we get our A chord shape that we had down here. So those are all of the positions where you can play your A major triads. In order to change keys, we do it just like we talk about all the time on these movable chord shapes. So if I take this A chord shape and say I move it up here to the 5th fret, now I get a C chord. I can play a C bar chord here, and then I can play my C chord right here in this D shape with a C on top of it, just like it is down here. So you can take this and move it anywhere to play in any key or to play your triads in any key. So to me, I think it's easier to think about this in movable chord shapes than it is in three-note sections making triads. But if you can play your movable chord shapes, if you can do that up and down the guitar neck, then you can already play all of your major triads, whether you realized it or not. Now, I do want to give you something that I think is really useful when it comes to these movable chord shapes or these triads, because there's really no sense in learning them everywhere if you're not going to use them. So here's something that I find really useful when you're talking about these triads or these movable chord shapes. And that is, if you're, say up the guitar neck playing, say in this bar chord A shape, you don't want to have to jump all the way back down to, say, play an E or a D chord. It's really useful if you can know where these chords are in the position that, of where you are. Say you're up here playing in your BB King box, and then you want to go to a D chord. You don't want to have to jump all the way back down here. So I'm going to show you how easy this is to actually play any chord you want where you are. So if we're around this A chord shape, so we're going to do this in the key of A, but again, remember these are movable anywhere to play in any key. If we're around this A chord shape, to go to our 4 chord, in this case would be a D, we can switch and play a D like this, or we can play this shape. And this makes your 4 chord. So anywhere you're playing this A chord shape, play this shape, and all of a sudden you've got your 4 chord, or in this case, a D chord. So your 1 chord, your 4 chord, and if you want to go to your 5 chord, in this case would be, you would need to go to an E chord. We can move down here and play like an E, which would be your bar chord shape. Or we can take this 4 chord and move it 2 frets up. So our 1 chord, our 4 chord, our 5 chord, or our 5 chord right here, and then back to our 1 chord. If we come up here to this position where we're playing our bar chord, and this is probably the one y'all are most familiar with, to go to our 4 chord, we can go to this A chord shape here where we're laying our finger flat, playing this kind of a bar chord. So our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and then to go to our 5 chord, we can move this up 2 frets to play our 5 chord, or to go to our 5 chord, we can play this D or C chord shape, however you want to look at it. We can play that right here, because remember, this was our 4 chord, moved up 2 frets to get a 5 chord. So a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, and then back to your 1. Now, if we come up here to this position where we're playing this D chord shape, when we go to our 4 chord, we can just make this bar chord or F shape, move it up 1 fret, and we get our 4 chord. So our 1 chord, our 4 chord, and then to play our 5 chord, we can again move this up 2 frets, or we can just lay our finger flat, and we would get, this A chord shape. But we can just lay it flat and kind of play these middle 3 strings, and then we get our 5 chord as well. So there you don't really have to move very much at all. Now, how this is useful is, let's say you're playing in some bar chord shape, but let's say you're playing in some strange key like B flat. Okay? So we're playing in B flat and you want to go to your 4 chord. Well, now you don't really have to think about it, and you don't really have to worry that it's an E flat. You just lay your finger flat, and all of a sudden you're playing the 4 chord, back to your 1 chord, your 5 chord, and back to your 1 chord, and you really never have to move out of this position, and all of a sudden you've played a B flat, an E flat, and an F, all right here in this position. So you can use these little patterns, these little tricks, these little triads or these movable chord shapes, and be able to play in any key anywhere around the guitar neck. So I really do hope that you work on this. I hope that I've made it a little bit easier for you to digest and understand what this is. I hope that you enjoy it, and as always, if you need something, reach out to me. I'll be glad to help you.